Well, first of all, welcome to everybody here today. Thank you for attending this meeting. Sarah, do you have any apologies?
Yep, we have the apologies this morning from Kim Crittenden and Dennis Robertson. And as I said, Tom Power is going to be 30 minutes late arriving, and Lorraine Scott has to leave at noon for other commitments.
Brilliant. Thank you for that. Just got someone else joining as well. Thank you. Right, moving. Do we have any declarations of interest this morning, please? None. Thank you. Okay, moving on then to opening remarks, and just welcome you all again to this meeting, and thank you very much for coming along today. I'm delighted to be chairing my first board meeting as chair today, and I would firstly like to pay tribute and give thanks to John Tomlinson, who became interim chair in July 2021 and provided supportive, visible leadership as the board designed its strategy and delivery plan. John now chairs our new Population Health Committee, which will be critical as we work with partners to address the underlying determinants of health. And I am very glad that we will continue to benefit from his experience and thoughtfulness. As interim vice chair, Luann Grujon has been very supportive to John and the chief executive team and has championed our board culture development. I'm delighted that she has agreed to continue with that piece of work, although she has now stepped back from the vice chair role. John and Luann, both of you, thank you very much for your exemplary leadership contributions to this board during an especially challenging time. Thank you very much, both. This is also the final board meeting for our longest serving non-executive board member, Rona Atkinson. I know that Rona does not want any fuss made to mark her 8 years service, but I wanted to make sure that our appreciation and thanks for her passion and her commitment to us being a high-performing, robust board is recorded. Rona has had periods as interim chair and has served on 2 IJBs and has made a very significant impact in those roles. So thank you very much, Rona. Everyone will miss you very much. In my first month in the post, I have enjoyed meeting the board and the chief executive teams, and particularly staff from a range of teams, including the Cancer Pathway, Unscheduled Care and maternity colleagues at Dr. Gray's, as well as getting to know the Staff Equalities Network. I'm impressed by the passion and dedication to providing quality care in the face of very serious pressures caused by demand for care and acutely ill patients. Whilst health and social care colleagues continue to grapple with considerable challenges, I would like to put on record a formal acknowledgement of the dedication, care and compassion that they continue to show every day whilst delivering care to others. Since mentioning every deserving individual would be totally impractical, I will instead draw the board's attention to those who were singled out recently in the recent Scottish Health Awards, but to exemplify their colleagues and reflect that people, as set out in our plan for the future, are our most important asset as we work towards a sustainable model of social health and care. The Scottish Health Awards are the most recognised awards for those working across NHS Scotland and its partners, and this year received over 750 nominations across 16 categories. This makes it all the more remarkable that NHS Grampian won top accolades in 2 categories and was shortlisted in another. On behalf of the board, I would like to extend our congratulations to Dr. Balasubramaniam Vijayan from Gastroenterology, who won the Doctor Award, and to Dr. Fiona Mackenzie, Consultant Clinical Scientist, who won the Leader of the Year Award, and the team at Rosewell House, who were also shortlisted in Integrated Care category. Congratulations to all. We should celebrate successes such as these and take every opportunity to promote NHS Grampian as an innovative health board and exciting place to work. I am therefore also very pleased that we have recently completed filming for firstly a second Channel 4 series of Rescue Medics, which highlights our key role at the heart of the National Trauma Network, and secondly, and ITN Production, promoting our groundbreaking work with the Australian company Analyze.ai. The film Lungs Matter is an education programme in association with the British Thoracic Society. All of those supporting the production of these programmes and telling our stories have my thanks, and I'm sure the thanks of the board as well. We have a very busy agenda today with several complex items on it. And so I'll hand over to Caroline for her remarks before we press on to business. Thank you, Caroline.
Thank you, Alison. I noted that Rona popped her hand up and I didn't know if she wanted to come in or if that was an error with your hand, Rona.
Well, I did want to come in, but I think we've maybe passed the time for it. But if people would indulge me, unlike other prior non-execs, it will be less than a minute. Thank you for your kind words, Chair. And thank you also for having them very brief. Can't be doing with us. Never really was much my thing. It's been an interesting 8 years, and I think what lies ahead will be even more interesting. But it wouldn't be me if I didn't have an ask of you all, because this is my last chance to make it, apart from what I've got in the papers in the agenda. The current time is just fraught with people looking at crises and failure and things not being right. But actually, there's an opportunity in there for all of us, given the way conversations are going with the public at the moment. So my ask is that you take this opportunity and you recast NHS Grampian with due cognizance of the principles that Bevan gave us, but make it fit for the 21st century. It's a huge ask, it's a brave ask, but somehow I think this is the team that will manage to do it. So I wish you well, and I'll watch to see that ask fulfilled. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Rona. Thank you. I saw your hand go up and then it went down again. So thanks very much for that. And thank you for leaving us with that ask as well. And very much appreciate your service. And thanks for leaving us with that ask that I'm sure everyone will work with great commitment to achieve. Thank you. Okay,
Thanks,
I saw some
Rona.
claps. I saw some claps to you. I'll turn to Caroline now. Thank you.
Thanks, Alison, and thanks for those words of encouragement, Rona. They are most welcome. So, as Alison has set out and actually underpinned there by Rona's comments, I am really looking forward to, excuse me, covering a number of important issues that really matter to you, the board, our colleagues and citizens in Grampian in today's board meeting. My hope is that from the breadth of work that will be presented today and discussed, that we are going to evidence transparency of the challenges that we face. However, really importantly, our constant focus on our values of caring, listening, and even more so encouraged by Rona to continue to improve despite the challenges and use the opportunities as we see them. As you'll be aware, winter in the NHS is our busiest time, and we have an item on that in today's agenda. So as we enter the coldest months of the year, it would be remiss of me not to reflect on the significant amount of work that has been undertaken to help us to prepare for this year. In addition to the preventative activity like our seasonal flu and COVID vaccination programmes, there are improvements underway within unscheduled care that will create efficiencies and reduce waits as we move through the next few months, and as well as improving our communications and constant engagement with colleagues and the public and partners. And again, that item will be covered by Stuart later on in the agenda. In addition to the seasonal pressures we usually experience this year, we have some context challenges around our starting position. So the challenges that we have faced continuously throughout the year have not let up, and that clearly will take its toll on our performance as well as our colleagues' health and well-being. On top of that, this year, as many of you are aware, we anticipate and continue to work to understand that industrial action may take place. Recognising that unions are not acting as one but as separate entities, and that industrial action does not necessarily mean strikes, we have established structures that will enable us to react appropriately in order to maintain services. And as I attended the Staff Governance Committee yesterday, I was further assured that our NHS Grampian's partnership working model and collaborative relationship with staff side will absolutely enable us to work together to maintain and deliver essential and emergency health services as safely as we possibly can as the consequences of industrial action emerge. For note, Alison and colleagues, as I know it remains a really important topic for us as a board, you will see the Dr. Gray's strategy progress presented by Adam, supported by Simon today. And to just confirm for colleagues in case it's something that they're holding, although Model 6 planning is referenced in the How Are We Doing report, there will be an additional board meeting to consider the plan for Model 6 for maternity services on the 15th of December, and that was to align with the time scales for submission to Scottish Government. So just for awareness that will be on the 15th of December. And I will hand back to you, Alison. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Caroline. Thank you. We'll move on to item 4, which is the minutes of the meeting that was held on the 6th of October 2022. Sarah, please.
Yes, we have a correction that we noticed after the pack had gone out. So to get that on the record, it's item 3, where we say that Dr. Caldwell's acknowledged that this was the first board meeting, the first paragraph. It was actually John Tomlinson. It's pretty difficult to confuse John and Adam, but we managed to do it. So we will correct the minute, and we'll also delete paragraph 2 because that's a repetition of something that they also said later on in the minute.
Thank you very much for that, Sarah. Thank you. Any other corrections noted to the minutes? No, minutes can be agreed then. Thank you. Any matters arising from those minutes, please? No? Okay. Well, thank you very much for that, and thank you for producing the minutes too. Moving on then to item 5, the performance report. We have 2 reports under this heading. First of all, the Systems Pressures Performance Report, and I'll turn back to Caroline, please, for comment on this report.
Thanks, Alison. So Kate Danskin is going to take us through the highlights of this report, and I have suggested to Kate, as long as you are content, that we take both reports prior to handing over to a couple of exec colleagues for a bit more detail on areas that I would imagine will generate further interest, and then open out for further questioning. The risk of taking the 2 papers separately is we'll get questions on the first paper that are actually answered in the second. So hopefully that will work. And Alison, if you're content with that, I will just hand over to Kate.
Thank you, Caroline. Thank you, Kate.
Okay, thank you both, and good morning, everyone. As Alison has just said, for the performance item today, there are 2 separate papers, and this is reflective of our journey to a new, more strategic level report for the board on our progress to deliver the plan for the future by setting out performance against the deliverables contained in our annual delivery plan. But turning first to 5.1, the system pressure report, the data set at Appendix 1 on page 20 of your pack remains in the format considered as a board throughout the pandemic and focuses on the operational system pressure data. This data set is produced in this format, considered in detail across the system on a fortnightly basis. But the data you have in your packs is as this stood at 9th of November. Between now and then, inevitably, there have been some areas of performance deterioration and some areas of improvement. And this inevitable fluctuation of operational management information is one of the reasons we aim to move from this form of reporting to a new format for the board. Clearly, however, the report sets out the continuing significant pressure and challenge and the tactics to respond continues at pace and will be outlined at agenda item 7 this morning in the approach to this winter. Moving to 5.2 at the appendix, which starts on page 47 of your pack, you have just the second iteration of the new How Are We Doing report, which shows an overview against all of the deliverables contained in NHS Grampian's annual delivery plan. As was agreed with the board, we are still developing this report, but this is the first fuller one reflecting the quarterly data reporting to Scottish Government for the position at the end of September against our delivery plan, and that was submitted to Scottish Government at the end of October. So when we delivered and when we developed the measurables to be contained in our annual delivery plan to the end of March 23, which was endorsed by Scottish Government, we were very keen to ensure these were ambitious but also realistic. And one of the motivations for this was to ensure colleagues working in the system were supported with realistic targets. However, production of this version of the How Are We Doing report has highlighted some unintended consequences of that approach. So, for example, performance for unscheduled care in the How We're Doing report is reflected with the RAG status of amber. As in our annual delivery plan, we focused on the target of eliminating 12-hour waits in our emergency departments. The result of that has meant overall performance of unscheduled care is not reflected in this report. And as you'll see from the system pressure report, undoubtedly, if the 4 and 8 hour performance targets were included in the How Are We Doing report, the RAG status would have been read. However, as part of the ongoing development of this report, the Chief Exec team are considering a number of ways to address this for next versions. Another example of, or another aspect of development under consideration is the reporting process to ensure there is an understanding and transparency of the operational performance pressures and subsequent risks for the board. One of those ways means you will see at the next board meeting in February an overarching written chief executive report, which will come to future meetings of the board in order to be able to cover aspects not included in specific reports. The detail of reporting on performance on the annual delivery plan to the assurance committees is still under consideration, and the performance assurance, finance and infrastructure committee reporting is also under development, and a first version of that report, which contains much more detail, will be considered at the PAFIC meeting on the 21st of December. I've had some really helpful comments and questions on the How You Doing report from some board members, which we are addressing for the next version. A drop-in session for the board to be able to discuss in detail the format of the developing report has been arranged for January the 10th. And you should all have that in your diaries and will enable us to continue to develop this report together. I would also draw the board's attention to another omission of detail in this version of the report, which will be fuller for the next version. An example of that is under the time to treat guarantee deliverable on page 61 of your packs. The oversight and assurance box on that page is incomplete. This deliverable is also assured through scrutiny at PAFIC and the Chief Exec team. So a lot of work still to do, but I hope you will agree it is starting to look like something that is meaningful and helpful to the board. I'm now going to hand over, as Caroline said, to Mr. Paul Baku and then Dr. June Brown to address some of the specific questions that have been shared in advance about this agenda item. So over to you, Paul.
Okay, thank you, Kate, and good morning, colleagues. The first item that is requiring a response is the data that relates to our performance for those waiting in the over 2-year bracket for TTG, i.e. surgery. I think the first thing to say is that our performance is not the issue, but our capacity is absolutely the issue, and we have a significant backlog. We had a significant backlog in the group of patients waiting for periods of time that we prioritize as SGATS 3, which is essentially 12 months prior to the pandemic. There are a number of reasons why this has been an endearing issue with us, and they relate to factors related to our estate, i.e. our capacity. We have theatres which for various reasons are not able to function or are functioning with activity that's been displaced from somewhere else. So we have problems underlying with relating to estates. We have infrastructure backlog issues regarding certain areas that are in our prioritized queue for attention. We have a chronic workforce shortage in theatres, albeit it's had significantly improved by the work done by the team. We run a system where our available resource is aligned to the highest clinical risk group. We have repeatedly reviewed our performance and can be confident that what we have, we use well. What we have, we use well for those at highest risk. Our ability to perform high volume, low complex surgery, which is the majority, if not the exclusive content of those waiting for 2 years, is dependent on ambulatory facilities. We have a shortage of ambulatory facilities. We are dependent on the independent sector and external providers, whether they're national NHS assets or what we call pop-up facilities in other health boards, such as the Vanguard in Stracathro, Tayside. These areas we are vulnerable to the risks that each of those areas presents, particularly if they're run through staff that can be deployed elsewhere in the host health board. A number of reasons for that backlog therefore exist. So that was one of the areas. The second area is around our ability to deliver target regarding the 2-year waits. We have agreed with Scottish Government colleagues that we will be able to deliver the target required by March 2023. Despite all the challenges, we are on schedule to deliver that and make good our promise with what we have. And lastly, our cancer performance. The 62-day cancer performance is an interesting area. Our performance runs between 60 and 70% at present. We have committed to an 83 to 85% by the end of March next year. We currently have the lowest level of breaches for cancer pathway targets that we have had for 6 months. They're running at 40. And as we eat into our breach, our performance declines. When our breach count rate hits 20, our performances are in the high 80s to 90s. So hopefully that will explain why doing more produces a kind of a negative outcome in performance. So that's cancer 2-year waits. I don't think there was anything else, Kate, that I was asked to comment on. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul, and I will just pick up on the questions in relation to 2 things. One, student nurse numbers, and the second, supplementary staffing. So starting with student numbers, the ask was in relation to have Scottish Government increased the numbers of undergraduate students for nursing. The answer to that is yes, they have. They have year on year increased the numbers for adult and mental health and learning disability nursing. These are the 3 areas that we have the greatest vacancy numbers within. However, locally and nationally, higher education institutes have been unable to fully recruit to those undergraduate programme numbers that they have been given. So although we know there is a significant number of students that who will qualify from local HEIs, they may choose not to stay locally because they haven't originated from the area prior to starting their education in Aberdeen. We're working with NES, NHS Education for Scotland, to understand that data and understand where the students go to, where they come from, and looking at ways how we can improve the retention. So I hope that answers that question. The second question is in relation to supplementary staffing, and really it's looking for clarity on the data that's presented within the report. So just for clarity, the target for savings from the spend on supplementary staffing is 18.1 million, and that's for the full year. That's a 25% saving from the amount that's spent last year. So in the report, you'll see 7.8 million, which was in the spend. So the spend that had occurred in Q1, and 15.7 is the spend that has occurred against supplementary staffing in Q2. We really welcome the feedback on this, and we can have a look at the report to improve how we record it in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Kate, do we come back to you, or no, you're fine?
I think, I just think open up for any further questions, Alison, now.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Kate. Thank you. And thank you to you and the team for the reports, and also for presenting to us today. It's very helpful to see this development, so thank you. And obviously we note the session coming up in January to look in further detail about this as well. I think we've obviously got two sets of questions here to move towards the recommendations. First about content of these reports, and then we'll talk briefly about the format in advance to anything we might say in more detail in the January meeting. So first of all, comments on the content and what's said within it. I've got Rona, Amy and Derek, so I'll turn to Rona first, please. Rona.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it's a brief comment, and I've already shared it with Kate and yourself and Carolyn. I really like the style that's developing, and I know we're on a journey. My plea when you discuss it in January is to make sure that, as these are the formal board documents, that they give you sufficient recorded organisational memory. If you ever have to go back and there's a gap there, then you're pretty sunk. Some of the statements, if you're around them, you know what they mean. Some could be open to interpretation later on. So just bear in mind the need for organisational memory. Thank you.
Thanks very much for writing that, Rona. That's a really important reminder to us all. Thank you. Amy, please.
Thanks, Chair. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for this, Kate and team. Really helpful pair of papers. So 5.1. I was wondering how patient and carer feedback is supporting executive thinking around the decision making in assessing performance. So that kind of triangulation, and a similar question to paper 5.2 as well. And I also note for 5.2, we've got one patient story that led to change in the pictogram, so I wanted to pick that up. And I guess we get the patient voices around the design of the how are we doing report, because what do patients want to see? So those are kind of two similar questions for those two papers. And also for 5.2, I note that there are lots of notes. We're asked to note a lot of things in that paper. And as this is being developed with board members, I'd like to see more kind of language around offer support, offer comments, offer scrutiny, challenge, offers of information, that sort of thing. So those are my bits of feedback. But I like the performance report format for its visibility and transparency. So I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, thanks, Amy. On that last point, obviously, as the programme develops, as the work develops, that will obviously become the focus of what we're looking at that point as well. We're just in the process of development at the moment in many ways. But Paul, your hand went up. Do you want to comment on anything there?
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Amy. I think that the question I'd like to just quickly respond to is the patient feedback. So one of the things that as a portfolio, our portfolio programme board are doing is spending. I think we spent about 7 months developing a balanced scorecard, which is our tool to report to the programme board our performance. And in that balanced scorecard is a significant section where we look for patient feedbacks at the present time. In terms of moving forwards, I think future work, particularly around the NTC, there will be a significant contribution from the public and lay persons in terms of the design and infrastructure. So thank you, Amy.
Thanks, Paul. Derek?
Thank you. Just to note, I too like the direction that we're moving in terms of the reporting here. I think that's very good progress. Well done. One question, call before you convey for the ambulance people. Do we know how well that's doing?
Thank you. Does anyone have any information on that at the moment, or is that something to bring back? Nick, please, Nick.
Yeah, very happy for us to actually bring back their update report. So the initial high-level data on that, Derek, shows that it is converting quite a number of calls to non-conveyance. What though the analysis needs to go into much more detail in terms of then what are the outcomes for individuals who then not brought to hospital in terms of their other pathways that they've interacted with, and the overall impact that that has on ambulance crowding, ED crowding, and subsequent patient care. So the high level initial sort of data is that it's very positive. It's been very well received by the ambulance service. It seems to have had some very positive high level changes. I think the detailed analysis, though, is important to understand that wider system impact.
Thank you. Kate, your hand's gone up. Do you want to comment as well?
I just wanted to reflect back a little from Amy's helpful comments, and just really to draw attention to the importance of our session on the 10th of January. We are going to take everything feedback we've had in this meeting and out with, and potentially come up with some options as well. So really be seeking support of the board to guide the next version of it. So thank you for that. And I've forgotten what else I was going to say, but if I remember, I'll come back.
That's helpful, Kate, and that meeting will be really important to help analyse where we're going and what we need in these reports for future as well. So again, commend that meeting to everybody on the 10th of January. Thank you. Sandy, your hand was up. Are you?
I think it's been answered really by Kate. I suppose the only other reflection I would have, Chair, is I mean, I too think that the reporting's come on considerably, and I just want to acknowledge the huge amount of work that Kate has done and her colleagues. I mean, it's just a remarkable job really in terms of what's been delivered so far. I suppose the only thing I would want to say, and maybe other members of the board might want to reflect on it, I think we perhaps need to be a little bit sharper in terms of, we're very good at identifying what the risks and challenges are, what the mitigations are that are in place, and some of the actions that are being taken, but it feels as if there's not that much of a golden thread between what the concerns and the particular issues are and what the particular actions are. Because I think presumably as a board, we need to be able to tease out and evaluate whether these actions are actually having the desired effect or not. I mean, it was interesting. I'm sure Simon won't want to come in. We had a really excellent development session yesterday in Murray, and we had a really good IJB meeting in Murray last week. And there was a lot of discussion about some of the new models that are being developed to try to kind of free up capacity and flow in the system, but some of those had unintended consequences. So some of those new models had attracted staff from care at home, and that had left vacancies, so there were pressures in other parts of the system. So I think in terms of PAFIC, we would want to explore what are the very specific actions that are linked to what the issues are, and are they actually making a difference?
Yes, and yeah, I very much endorse that as well. It's important. We have these figures in front of us. We need to very much know how things are moving forward, and we need to be able to assess that difference that's being made from it, and see who's doing what and the overall impact of that. I think that was clear from a couple of the things I picked out from the second report as well, around how we're funding things moving forward. So yeah, I would agree that's something we need to look at on the 10th of January as well. I'm sure Kate's got that on the agenda for then. Joyce, thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I'm really pleased with the way this report's going. It's developing very nicely, giving us some really good, pertinent information. A couple of things that I noted. The one about access, when I realised that this is probably more linked to the IGBs, but it's part of the portfolio reporting. I looked back at the engagement work and the feedback from people, and for a lot of people, access is about primary care access. And I think, although it's coming from the IGBs, I think we need to note any improvements in this here as well, because it does impact on everything else that we're doing. And it's a bit of an elephant in the room that we sort of ignore. So I'd like to see something on that in the access part through the IGBs. And also in the communities part, the engagement work, obviously it's going to be related to the new Population Health Committee, but I did wonder in some of this reporting if we're setting ourselves up for failure, because some of the engagement seems to be raising expectations of the population. There's going to be a huge difference in what we can deliver in the future because of the financial situation. And by continually asking people what they want, as opposed to what they want for the money that we have and what can possibly be done for that, I think we need to be more honest with our population and make them realise that we're all working to a budget, and it's going to be a tighter budget as time goes on. So I'd like to see population health looking at that more specifically. Thanks.
Thanks very much for that, Joyce. Thank you. John, please.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, and like others, I very much support the way this is shaping up and coming together, and also the cross-referencing of performance and risks. So reading the report, there is that element that Sandy's saying about sort of joining up the different elements, because you can see the different parts. I was also curious about the kind of sustainability fix in the background, because the report can be give us assurance, I think, around we're doing what we can in and amongst the firefighting that's needed. But I'm kind of curious in the background, and I know it's not straightforward, but is it for us as a board to have in mind the sustainability bit, or is that a national issue? And it'd just be interesting to get some reflection on where the attention's going, or where the effort is going, for that longer term fix, if you like. And that also fits with what Rona's asked us to have a focus on going forward. So very much assured about the performance bit and what we can do in the immediate. I'm just interested as a board, will we get alongside this progress and attention to the future?
Thanks for that, John. That's important context, isn't it? That we can't separate ourselves from the wider picture as well. There's things happening that are happening everywhere, and wider forces at the moment as well, causing increased risks as well and challenges for everybody. So that's obviously something that we do need to bear in mind and look at the work going forward. I've got Batty and Adam Caldwell's wanting to come in. Batty, are you continuing on this theme, or?
Yes, indeed.
Yeah,
so I think I was going to make the same point that John's done, but also add something more to it, in the sense that to what extent are our future plans based on our prediction or anticipation of activity over the next few years? Thanks.
Thank you. I think that's something we will have to bear in mind all the time. But Adam.
Yeah, I'll maybe try and make an effort at John's very large question about sustainability and how does it work across a country and a local system. So I think my sense of it would be it's both and, isn't it? So in terms of a national direction around immediate actions, then pretty much everyone around this table in an executive role is part of national groups where the sustainability of health and care is a frequent discussion. So we're influencing and being influenced. We've clearly set out in the plan for the future very different population health. So we're trying to pursue that. And lots of the work that we're doing with government and broader colleagues is trying to explore some of those and actually try and see how we could be, testing those on behalf of broader country approaches. My other sense is something much bigger than that, which is very much around the cultural and political lead. And when I appeared at a parliamentary committee about a month or so ago, we were all asked what what was it that government could do? And my advice was that we should get more and more people reading literature like Atul Gawande's Being Mortal, where we're looking at a cultural change in how we work as a society around aging and things like that. So I think there's multiple tracks that we need to do, definitely things that are directly in our control and definitely things we can influence, and then something about a much bigger society question of changes in population and health and care provision.
Thank you, Adam. Caroline?
Thanks. So really helpful comments from everybody, and not to repeat Adam's narrative there around in response to John's helpful question. It has to be a constant, to use John's language, twin track of dealing with the here and now, and however, absolutely with a focus on and how are we going to achieve our 2032 ambition of sustainable health and care. And that is also a both and national and local imperative for us to focus on through influencing and working together nationally. I could include regionally and locally within that. And I think whilst we deal with the here and now, and that has been, it's really helpful to hear how that's landed through the How Are We Doing report. All of that is being done with a lens of not stepping backwards and trying to constantly step into the new way of doing things. And I think right back to Amy's point around how are public and service users involved in decision making, that takes us to a place of having that more realistic and honest conversation that Joyce has called for. So there is absolutely a need for organisational, systemic, national and societal change, and we need to do all of that as best we can. And I think what we have are the foundations to do that, but by absolutely involving public in our decision making with colleagues, it will allow them to see the level of challenge and to help us shape that through the next few years as we move forward with our strategy. But I think it is really important that the ambition of the How Are We Doing report is to do exactly as John has described, which is to make sure the board is sighted on our progress towards our strategic intent, and constantly checking through the committees, have the assumptions that have been made about particular interventions been realised, or are there unintended consequences that we need to revisit? So that's the really important piece of work that's ongoing now around what's being assured at the committees and what from that needs to come to the board. So recognise it's not nicely, neatly packaged at the moment, but I think conversations like this remain really helpful to allow the teams that are around this to progress. Thanks.
Thank you, Caroline. I think it's important to be able to understand what we can do ourselves in the context that we're in, and what we can do locally with partners, and the difference we can make working with others locally and regionally, and then what the challenges are being faced nationally, and how we can contribute to moving forward and addressing some of those challenges as well, and supporting population health in its widest sense during that time. So I think there's an element here as well of recognising the importance of working with others, both locally and nationally, so that thread that Sandy spoke about is going to be delivered and moved forward effectively. Luann, please.
Thank you. Just really a comment. I agree with everything that's been said. I suppose it's just when we're thinking about the public, it's just a reminder we're not thinking about one group of people who are all the same, but we've got a diverse range of people in our communities, and we don't have a one size fits all. So I'd really like, as we see this work develop, that we see coming through how we are wrapping care around people who need more care than others to get the same outcomes, and just not forgetting our ambition around inequalities and how we need to see that visibly coming through as well. So thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Luann. It's important that everything we do is inclusive as well, that everybody feels that we're talking to them as well, and working with them and listening to voices from right across our communities. Thank you. Okay, I can't see any other indications on this one. Okay, just a reminder again of the meeting in January that Kate spoke to us all about, and we've got various recommendations here as well to agree. Can we go back first of all to 5.1 paper, and the recommendations there were to note that the demand across the system continues to challenge the organisation's ability to consistently meet the 3 key objectives described at 2.1 above, and agree it has received assurance about system performance within the specific context of demand pressures and workforce availability and resilience. Can we agree the recommendations on 5.1, please?
Yes.
Thank you. And then, thank you. And then we turn to 5.2, and the recommendations on 5.2 were, sorry, just move to 5.2 recommendations. We are here noting, as Amy pointed out to us, we're noting the progression of the reports here and noting the information in each one, and noting a session to discuss the How Are We Doing report at Appendix 1 for January, and agreeing that the How Are We Doing report at Appendix 1 now meets the needs of a board, and the system pressure report will no longer be included in the performance reporting to the board. That last one, 2.4.4, are we happy to agree that at this stage?
Yes.
Yes,
I
Chair.
wouldn't be.
Who said that? Sorry.
Rona said that.
Rona, do you want to speak to us, please?
Given the discussion we've had about further development, you could be leaving yourself with a gap. But ultimately, I won't be here, so but that's where I would stand.
Okay, thank you for that, Rona. That's very helpful. Caroline?
Thanks, Alison and Rona. We've been really thoughtful of this recommendation, and it may be that the board wants to hang on to it for assurance. That just to remind colleagues that within the paper content, which we probably could have drawn out more explicitly in the recommendation, any key areas of challenge relating to our performance will now come in a paper from me as a systems pressures paper, as opposed to a slide set around the data. So that was one of our alternatives. It is very clear that we want to and must remain transparent with the public and the board in relation to the impact and consequences of what we're doing on operational performance, but a real desire, based on all the work we've done, to move the board away from scrutinising and getting into the operational detail, and for that to be done at assurance committees where that's necessary. So I don't think there's a right and a wrong here and a right and a wrong timing thing. I think it's when the board feels content to let go.
Thank you. Ian, please.
Thanks, Alison. Listening to what Rona said and Caroline, I wondered whether perhaps we could add to what the board agrees. I won't try and repeat the words that Caroline used because they were much better than how I could remember them. But the bit about the comment about anything that's a significant system challenge being reported in the new paper that will be reported to the board from the chief executive. And if that would provide Rona with some assurance about continuity, and also flag to the board and other stakeholders that we do recognise that as a vitally important issue. As I say, I'm sure others can put that in better words than I can.
Thank you, Ian. John?
Just trying to come off mute there, sorry. Yes, same point as Ian. I think we should minute that there will be that extra paper coming forward, but we can also note that the detail, or there will be detail going to the PAFIC committee, so that there will be an opportunity to have sight at the detail. That's my assumption anyway. Maybe check if that is correct.
Sarah, can you confirm that's correct?
My understanding is it is, but I think I'd like to ask Kate. Kate is the performance lead. Kate and Sandy as chair of PAFIC, just so we're absolutely clear what's going there.
maybe just to jump in, that's absolutely right, Sarah. That's what I would see happening, and maybe for a discussion for January, Caroline. I think one of the things that's maybe missing, apart from that absolute direct link between actions, between issues and actions, is just that sort of analysis of or oversight, the kind of so what bit about what this tells us, because looking at very particular areas of performance, you can sometimes miss some of the things that are connecting or should be connecting but aren't, and where some of the gaps and issues are. So I think that sort of analysis and oversight would be really useful, because I'm sure that's happening in the leadership team anyway. But I think just to lift our gaze from the detail at times would be really important.
Thank you. I think we're moving to add something to the existing recommendation rather than to discount it. So thank you. Caroline, please.
Yes, so I think that both the additional paper that will come as a chief executive report, and that will pull together the analysis and the so what, Sandy, of the totality of the operational performance, if you like, in a way that I hope will be meaningful for all, and then bringing through the detail through PAFIC as we require to manage the risks, and indeed other committees, but absolutely being clear about what's going where. So I hope with both of those we could move away from providing a systems pressure report that is a slide deck to an overarching analysis of, so what does that tell the board about assumptions and the overall performance of the system, but not shy away from the detail that really matters in relation to the impact on colleagues and citizens.
Thank you, that's very helpful. Can we add to 2.4.4 then that we note there will be an additional new paper from the Chief Executive on systems pressures, and that detail will be brought forward through PAFIC? Can we add that point to those 2 points?
Yes.
With those points added then, can we agree the recommendations on paper 5.2 then?
Yes.
Thank you. I can't see any disagreement. So with that addition to 2.4.4, we agree the recommendations on 5.2. Thank you very much. That was a really helpful discussion. Thank you. Moving on then to item 6, the update on the NHS Grampian financial position. We'll turn to Alex Stephen, please, to introduce this. Alec, please.
Thank you. In relation to the current year, we continue to monitor progress against our local value and sustainability plan, and we'll be seeking to reduce the £30 million forecast overspend once we have confirmed delivery of the savings identified within this plan. The position for the current financial year remains relatively stable, although we will have to go through the winter period and this may impact on spend. For 2023-24, we have undertaken some high-level scenario planning, which I thought would be useful to share with the board. Underlying deficit from the current financial year carries through into the next financial year as we would expect. However, the point I would really like to draw the board's attention to is the section titled Commitments, which contains £40.3 million of new financial pressure in relation to pay awards and inflationary pressures. Like the additional costs that many of us are facing in our private lives, the NHS is also seeing costs rising rapidly in relation to spend on heating, food, medicines and other non-staffing costs. We'll be updating our medium-term financial framework to incorporate these costs. We'll also be considering the actions necessary to manage these costs, and this is something that the Chief Executive team have been considering carefully over the last few weeks and months. And I think it's worth highlighting to the board before I go any further that patient, staff and clinical requirements will be at the forefront of those considerations. In the report, I've highlighted some high-level key principles, which I think provide good starting point for our future financial strategy. And there's one in particular I would just like to go in a wee bit more detail about, which is Principle 2. And I think what you can see from the table in the report, we have included in all our financial scenarios provision to pass over the relevant share of any uplift we receive to the IGBs. Clarifications on any conditions around the pass-through of this funding will be established over the next few months. But what I think this principle is about is using our resources across the whole health and social care system to best effect, to ensure that when decisions are made, we understand the impact on the whole system and not just the individual board or organisation. However, I am mindful that the board may wish to discuss these principles more fully and time allows today, and we are looking to add finance as an agenda item to a seminar in January should fuller discussions be required. Chair, I'm happy to take any questions on the report.
Thank you very much, Alec. Thank you for a very, very important report here. Have you got any questions or comments from any members, please? Thank you. I've got Rona, Derek and Amy in that order, please. Rona.
Thank you, Chair. Alec, I welcome that you're going to have a discussion with the board about the principles. As I expressed to you, I don't think you could disagree with them in content, but the expression of them, given that this is a formal board paper and something we can rely on in the future, the expression is open to significant interpretation and people need to be clear as to what the principles could entail. My other observation is, and I suppose it's building on what Joyce commented on in the last paper, is the absolute transparency and honesty we need with the public about the financial situation. I applaud the efforts to clear our current overspend and to balance the budget in the coming years, but I think that will take more than transformation as people tend to think of it. I think we're looking at radical change in places, and I think we need to be totally upfront and totally honest about that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rona. Really important that aspect. Thank you. Derek, please.
Thanks, Alison. Two points really. Firstly, on that key principle number 2, it sounds to me as if what it's saying is a reduction because in spend on the IJBs because the overall NHS budget is in real difficulty. Yet the plan for the future's predicated on ensuring that we move people out of the hospital, which means that the IJBs have to do more. But yet this one sounds a little bit like they're going to get less. The second point is we're overspent on a pay budget by £16 million, near enough. Yet we're short on people, and I couldn't quite tally that up. Why are we overspent when we've got a shortfall of people working? Thank you.
Thank you. Alec, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I take Derek's point around about that in terms of principle 2. I mean, it is a high level principle there that I've put, you know, as I say, it is about cross system working. I'm quite sure that the integrated joint boards will also be facing inflationary pressures that they're going to have to manage too. So there is something about just how we work in partnership and how we join up the kind of the financial planning and around about how we set next year's budget, probably more so than we've ever had to do before. But there's no intention, as it sits at the moment on our side of things, to reduce IJB funding, and the intention is to pass through any uplift that's provided. Providing that's one of the considerations or one of the rules or the guidance that comes out from the Scottish Government at that point in time. So that's where we are as a board. But it's really what I'm trying to get there is that, you know, for instance, if there was, for example, major cuts in one part of the system, or as you've highlighted, the impacts that could have on the other one, and it's being aware of what that is and trying to have a kind of a more sophisticated approach to that whole financial plan across the whole health and social care estate. In relation to the pay, yeah, we have got a lot of that £16 million. My understanding is in relation to the additional costs that we have to pay for agency nursing and agency locums. So that accounts for a fair bit of there. But I do understand that we have got more nurses than we previously had before. But given the pressures within the system at the moment, that we require those to help to deal with that aspect. I don't know if there's any other further information I can provide in relation to that, but that's where we are at the moment.
Thanks, Alex. I think it's that openness and transparency all round is important at the moment, isn't it? I think. Amy, please.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Alex, for this. My question relates to item point 2.3.5 on the equality and diversity and health inequalities. What are we doing? What's your sense of what we're doing to mitigate impacts on vulnerable groups, those who might find it harder to access, physical disabilities and other special needs, in the decisions that we may have to make in the short term?
So any of the decisions that we need to make, Amy, we'll need to take an impact assessment on in relation to equalities, and it's important that we do that early, so we understand that, and that will need to be part of our planning around about, you know, what actions that we put in place to manage this overspend over the next 3 or 4 years. We're very mindful of that. We're very mindful of our requirements around that, and it's certainly something that's built into the process.
Thank you. I'll take Luann, Joyce and Steve, and then come back to Alec to if there's anything that needs rounding up from that. Luann, please.
Thank you, Chair. I think for me, and looking at the principles, what I would be more comfortable with seeing is is it explicitly stated that we are still committed to our strategic intent around driving prevention activities, and wherever possible for those activities to be delivered in community settings. And I think that's relevant for all the recommendation, all the principles, but particularly principle 2, so that when we are looking at how we work and use finance as a whole system, that we are absolutely following our intent to be more preventative and to drive that activity in the community. So I wonder if something could be added in to just make that explicit. I think that would give some assurance that this isn't, we're not going backwards with this, but we're protecting our strategic intent. Thank you.
Thank you, Luann. Joyce?
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Alex, for the transparency in this report. I specifically like the various scenarios that you've put forward to show us how things can be. A couple of things. We are consistently being asked the demand is for more complex care. There's a higher requirement for staffing standards in terms of numbers and the level of staff in our acute service. And there's a reduced pipeline for people coming in. And I'd like to be assured that we are having very honest conversations with Scottish Government about how much they can keep asking and what is feasible to be delivered, because they're in control of some of this, we are not. Secondly, for me, I want to be assured that the commitment we have to our staffing in terms of staff welfare, which will be requiring quite a bit of funding in the next couple of years, will not be the easy one to drop. Because staffing and keeping our staff is not just about paying them well, it's about the conditions, the culture, and I think it's vital that we have that funding in place to maintain NHS Grampian as a place people want to work. And we've seen the benefit of the We Care programme and the various occupational health and other support programmes that have been in place. And finally, there's a little mention in Principle 2 about obtaining the maximum value and efficiency in the delivery of services. And whilst I'd love to see more services being delivered in the third sector, I don't wish to see that being done simply because their terms and conditions are so poor in comparison to the NHS, and the pay is less that we can benefit from that. I want to see people being treated with equity in the way that we commission our services. Thanks, Alex.
Thanks, Joyce. And Stephen, please.
Thank you, Alison. Really building on Joyce's points, I would entirely agree, particularly with the last one, and actually linking it back to an earlier comment about the potential consequences on the health and social care partnerships. We have a range of different terms and conditions across the local authorities, the NHS terms and conditions, and the third sector. So it shouldn't be about a race to the bottom. It should not be about doing things on the cheap. While the key principles, insofar as they go, they are they're certainly going to be a stretch and challenging. For sure. Number 2 is okay. Number 3, I have concerns about, just in terms of, and I'm glad that it's the word should be delivered and not must be delivered, because as anyone with organisational memory in NHS Grampian knows, it's incredibly difficult to actually reduce costs, particularly with the terms and conditions as they are. And I say that, also in the context that we have a current pay dispute for this financial year. Traditionally in years gone by, pre-COVID, we used to start pay negotiations long before the start of a financial year. So, we're at month 9 for this financial year. Goodness only knows when actually we'll get round to beginning to discuss, the pay situation for the next financial year. Sorry if that's, doom and gloom, but, I think it's important that colleagues are reminded of it. Thank you.
No, it's important, Stephen. Thank you. I'll bring Caroline in and then turn back to Alex. Thank you, Caroline.
Thanks, and thanks to Alex and colleagues for this paper. I think it's generated a level of, I hope it's generated a level of understanding of the challenge and complexity that we face. And it's really interesting listening to the absolute desire for transparency and honesty, yet a range of setting out what the priorities need to be. So we need to be really joined up on that as a board. So just in response, I did have a specific, but just in response to a couple of comments that have been made, in order to continue to work towards, so related to the last item, our sustainable health and care ambition by 2032, addressing equality both within our colleagues and within our citizens has to be fundamental to that. Every day we learn more of the impact and consequences of not doing that. And so that has to be a key part of our prioritisation of how we do this going forward. And that again involves the absolute input from colleagues and citizens to help us design this as it will impact on them. So absolutely the focus on colleague health and well-being, as we've said numerous times, they are our greatest asset. So we have to remain focused and fund that appropriately and realistically, but in a different way in how we've managed to achieve that historically. And as Joyce, you said, it cannot be the easy one that we just stop dealing with culture and colleagues' health and well-being. So really welcome that, as well as the prevention and community-focused agenda, because that absolutely will drive our sustainable solutions by working with society to reshape this. So hopefully that's helpful, but that does not mean that by setting that out, the decisions we will have to make in regards to achieving that will be easy. And absolutely, we are working with Scottish Government colleagues, all of us as board members influencing, and as officers directly working with and supporting through our professional lines and groups that we work with. The specific thing I wondered would be helpful, just for a bit of clarity, probably from Alan Sharp. I see he's on the call. In relation to Principle 1, which on the face of it seems pretty straightforward. However, I think particularly for some portfolios, there has been a historical reliance on non-recurring funding. And so just to share what that actually means, Alan, I don't know if you're able to share, potentially using planned care as an example of the level of dependency that we have developed over the years of non-recurring funding and the risk that gives us now as we move forward, and something that we will have to work on together. But because just as that principle, it seems quite straightforward, but I wonder if colleagues on the board would benefit from a bit more detail.
Thanks, Caroline. Alan, are you able to contribute, please?
Yes, thanks, Caroline. Thanks, Claire, and many everyone. Yes, so for many years, non-recurring funding.
Alan, sorry, your speech is quite difficult to hear you at the moment.
Sorry, without the headphones.
Yeah.
Can you hear me now? Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
So for many years, our level of non-recurring funding from the government has been relatively stable. What we're seeing this year is that for the first time, a lot of our non-recurring funding elements are reducing in some shape or form, as the government has reprioritised funding to meet things like the pay award offer.
So whereas in the past we might have said, when people came along and said, I want to recruit someone on a permanent contract against non-recurring funding, we might have said, well, we've had that funding for a number of years now, it's likely that it's going to happen again. That's now no longer the case. So we're probably becoming more risk averse around making permanent commitments against non-recurring funding. That's what that first principle is really about. Thanks.
Thanks, Alan, for that clarification. Thank you. Alec, did you want to come back on anything?
Just really kind of to pick up on some of the comments. So I think the comments were really helpful actually in terms of shaping what we need to do. So I just a thank you from me, and we'll certainly pick that up and reflect it into the future conversations that we're going to have. So that was all from me. I don't know how you feel, Chair, about the third the recommendation about agreeing the principles, or whether you felt that we should have a further discussion on that and potentially add a few more principles in there and then come back to the board. But happy to take a view on that.
Yeah, thank you. I think there's two things we can either do. We can either add a principle around, I was noting down when people talking, something around the principle being committed to the strategic intent, including to communities, staff and partners, and continuing to work towards equality as a priority, was what I picked up from people's comments. We could either agree something along those lines now, or we could take the suggestion of not agreeing the key principles now, but coming back to them at another date. I've got Susan and Rona, please.
Yeah, thanks very much. I think we also touched on the need around prevention, and if we look at the Scottish burden of disease over the next 20 years, we are anticipating our population to reduce by around 20%, but the demand for health and care services to increase by 20%. And that is unless we can get serious about prevention. So I think the principles need to recognise our strategic intent, but be really explicit about it, if that's okay.
Thank you, Susan. Rona, please.
I couldn't agree to the decision to accept the principles as they stand, given the conversation we've just had, and that Alec in his introductory comments indicated there'd be further discussion on them in January. So if you could amend the recommendation that that's what will happen, as opposed to adding to the principles, because it's not just adding, there's also a degree of confusion that needs sorted out that you'll have in your discussions. So if the recommendation can be changed to reflect that there's an ongoing conversation, that I could approve.
Thank you for that, Rona. It's very helpful. Caroline, please.
Yeah, listening to the conversation, I think we would absolutely benefit from revisiting or visiting this in more detail in a subsequent meeting, so that we can be absolutely clear on in setting out these principles what the consequences of that will be, and it's not done without that level of understanding and thought in the interests of trying to agree the principles. It will not make any difference if we do it today. I think it will add more value that there is that shared understanding and we get it right with further discussion.
Brilliant. Thank you for all those contributions. So if we could change the second bit of the recommendation to agree that the principles will be further refined at a subsequent meeting, wording along those lines. With that amendment to that second recommendation or decision, Sarah, please.
Yeah, may I suggest that we word the recommendation to say that the principles will be further discussed at the board seminar on the 12th of January, and we'll bring the revised principles back to the February board meeting.
That clarity is absolutely brilliant. It gives us a deadline to do this, which is really important as well. Otherwise, it's left hanging there. So with that wording from Sarah, can we agree the first bit of the recommendation about assurance and agree the amended decision as suggested by Sarah there? And with that, agree the two bits of recommendation, please.
Agreed.
Thank you very much for those contributions. That was very helpful as well. Thank you. Moving on then to item 7, the approach to winter paper. I'm turning to Nick and Adam to introduce this, I think. I'm not sure who's going to start.
Thank you, Chair. It's myself who's going to kick off on this. So I think there's 3 aspects to the paper that I'd just like to draw our attention to, and then I'd like to say just a little bit about modelling, if that's okay. So I think the first thing is to be really clear that this is a build on a huge amount of work that was done last year. The board will have seen the Operation Iris paper, and we introduced many new ideas, new concepts and new processes, which have all been operationally very important and all have featured in as we go forward. I mean, GeoPes is one of them, but our approach to risk, our approach to ethics, the involvement of the ethics group, are real key features of how we approached last year. I think the second thing is that we've tried to simplify the paper by dividing it really into 3 sections for people to focus on. Those that are around operational delivery, the collection of specific improvement plans which are designed to improve the situation as we move through December, but the improvement to continue as we move past into the new year up to March. And the third aspect is really the contingency arrangements we put in place. And the important difference about contingency arrangements are all of our improvement and standard operational business is designed to protect all of our services as set out in the paper. When we move into a contingency arrangement, that requires us to pivot against the particular threat or issue that we're facing. So the last thing I'd just like to say something about is modelling. We've got a fantastic modelling team. I'd like to thank them for all the work they've done. The modelling's been incredibly helpful over the last few years, and actually it's performed extremely well. We've reviewed how well modelling did in the last year, and the tracking has been really tremendous. So the modelling is based on a huge amount of data, and it's fair to say that our data is very hospital rich. We increasingly are trying to expand that hospital rich data set into a sort of community rich data set. For example, GP data, in common discussion, we've often commented that GP data doesn't feature heavily in some of our modelling. You'll see in the communications report, which is to follow this, that there's some comments about increased activity with general practice, and we're hoping to get some wider general practice data coming through from Scottish Government in the next wee while, and I think building on some of that data will be extremely helpful. So I'm going to just stop there and very happy to open up to any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nick. Any questions or comments, please? Thank you. Luann, Batty, and then Derek, please. Luann.
Thank you. Just 2 from me. Really welcome the awareness around the ethics group, and I am conscious though over the last wee while that there's been less promotion of the ethics group, and I wonder what we can do to make sure that the decision makers who might be struggling over this winter period know about the group and know how to access the group. So that's my first question. Second one on modelling is just, we've heard about the increase in acuity of people coming through the front door at ED. Has there work being done now to understand why people are presenting differently so that we can better target more preventative activities in communities or with people with certain conditions? Thank you.
Thank you. Nick, do you want to comment?
Yeah, I'll take both of those. So the first point, Luann, very well made point, and I think as we've moved where COVID has sort of diminished slightly in terms of some of our focus, I think it's fair to say that we do need to refresh some of our communication strategy around things such as the ethics group. And so I think it's very possible to do. You're absolutely right. The ethics group is providing both individual clinical groups very helpful support about very difficult cases, and has also provided very good support in terms of how we develop strategies. So I think the fix there is straightforward, and we just need to do that. In terms of the issue around acuity of patients coming in, absolutely, that is a very common thread that's come back from conversations, and people will have had an opportunity at some point in the past to look at the analysis we had of the state of play in terms of unscheduled care that Gillian Evans and her team put a review together, and much of that tried to understand some of those factors such as acuity. So we definitely know it's there. We have some aspects to it we understand, and we know some of its impact. the detailed analysis about what is underpinning that, whether that relates to changes in chronic disease management as we've gone through COVID, whether it relates to delays in assessment, whether it relates in delayed diagnosis. At the moment, I think we believe we understand some of those things, but I don't think it would be fair to say that we've got the definitive analysis to say that's exactly where we would draw attention to. You know, example being the analysis of the data around excess mortality. We're actually seeing a change in the spectrum of that. Early on, we saw clearly lots of excess mortality associated with COVID and respiratory disease. That then moved into seeing some excess mortality with conditions, malignancy conditions and cardiovascular disease. And interestingly, that has reduced, and we've seen an increased feature associated with some of the wider cardiovascular disease. So I think that's a really, really important point. We're pretty keen on understanding it. Our understanding is only partial, but I do agree that's a really important aspect of how we focus treatment and services in the future.
Thanks, Nick. Batty, please.
Thanks, Nick. And you've taken us exactly to the point I was going to highlight, which is traditionally models have been observing events in the past and understanding the associations of those events in terms of predicting the future. And I appreciate the amount of work that's gone into the incredibly detailed modelling data that you presented. So that's brilliant. The only thing is things tend to be different sometimes in the future in all kinds of anticipated and unanticipated ways. Do you think your modelling is at that kind of stage of maturity where you can almost build in your disruptors and simulated interventions to see how the circumstances could be changed?
As ever, Batty, a really good question. And I guess the short answer, I don't think the sophistication is there yet in anyone's modelling approach. I think we have aspects to it. We've got tools which are being built that I think do help us with some of that. So an example early on in the pandemic that we used was understanding where we had deficits, if you like, in referral into certain pathways, understanding what the referrals into those pathways would have naturally converted to, and therefore that starts generating an idea about what is the unknown need that sits out there and how to model forward. So that aspect of modelling was very powerful. Have we utilised that to be able to look forward to say, what will that mean in terms of if we change the capacity in certain areas, would we mitigate it? I think the second area that we are getting into is we are understanding a little bit about the detail of a demand as we go forward in terms of the condition-specific demand. And so we're understanding a little more about how we should model about should we not intervene just in terms of changing capacity, but changing specific capacity in specific bits of our system. So I think we've got some nuances there. There's also some fantastic work around frailty that's coming through, but I don't think the short answer that we're there in terms of the sophistication that I think you're alluding to, although I'd love to be there.
Thank you,
Thanks
Derek.
very much.
Yeah, Derek.
Thanks, Alison. I asked Nick a couple of questions, and Nick was very good enough to respond to them. Thank you, Nick. But I thought if my understanding was a bit short, maybe some others were as well. But the first one was, what does reduce the percentage of early direct discharge from emergency department mean? And the second one was in relation to the number of people who are seeing their GPs has almost doubled since pre-COVID times. Maybe Nick could comment on that for everybody's benefit. Thank you.
I'd be delighted to, Derek, and really helpful questions as ever. So I think the first one is really this relates to people who attend our emergency department and after assessment go back home, return home. And there's clearly a group of people who receive assessment treatment and very appropriately are discharged, but we also have some people who are assessed and in fact don't need additional treatment at all. And I guess what this is highlighting is within that subset, there's a group of people where an alternative intervention could have been just as effective, potentially more timely, and a different place in the pathway. And by reducing that number by, for example, call before convey would be an example of that, we reduce potentially very short stay attendances in ED, which cause ED crowding and ambulance crowding as well. So that's the intention of that, and I apologise that that wasn't explained as well as it should be. The second point, really, I guess I try to pick up this in terms of the modelling. We absolutely proportionately have so much data within our secondary care sector, but a real sort of gap between that and the amount of data we have in the general practice sector. We absolutely know that general practice is very busy, and we also know that some of these toe in the water type analysis are showing us that there are very substantial increases in terms of the amount of activity, and that's been alluded to. What I think we don't know, and this is where we need the more data, is exactly who the people that's involving, what's it for, what's the outcome of that, and whether this represents, if you like, system failure demand, where people have gone to one place and not got the solution, so have gone to another place, whether this is about the consequences of, for example, delayed treatment in our system, so people are attending general practice or trying to attend general practice to answer questions because they're waiting for things still. We just don't have the fidelity of that data. There is a national project to produce more health board level and partnership level data, and we're actually hotly anticipating the first experimental release of that data. I'm checking my inbox every morning for that to see whether that starts giving us some of the information to understand what's going on in terms of general practice contact.
Thanks, Nick. I'll take Joyce, then John, and then come back for any answers to anything. Thank you. Joyce?
Thanks, Alison. I would just like to thank the team for a really great piece of work, which translates very complex modelling into relatively simple messages that we're now putting out to our population, which will help with the preventative agenda if it's taken up, as we hope it will be taken up. And I think this in itself gives us assurance of the capacity and the capability of our senior team and the executives to not only deal with the information that's coming in huge amounts in terms of the data, but also having listened to us over the last couple of years and what we think the needs are and how we understand it. So thank you everyone for this.
Thank you, Joyce. John?
Thank you, Alison. Yeah, I was particularly taken with 2.3 from page 89 onwards, and just the getting that specific detail around the high impact improvements and then the targets or what you expect against each of those. I'm just wondering whether the modelling then translates that back into what the impact will be across the whole system in terms of the flow. And maybe that's in there and I didn't pick it up clearly, but just translating that on the next stage into what's predicted for the flow. Is that intended as a next stage?
Again, John, really good question. So what we've done so far is to try to take the improvement plans that have a direct impact, we think, in terms of occupancy sitting within the secondary care sector, and we've modelled those in. So that's got a hard bit, which is predicting the impact, but we've done that, and then applying it, which is fairly straightforward. What you're also alluding to, which is absolutely correct, is many of the improvements actually look at streamlining, so reducing complexity, reducing handoffs, reducing queuing, and therefore improving flow. Those are much, much harder to model because our best surrogate marker seems to be around capacity. But where we see some of them is where we're starting to look at metrics which are around crowding. So if we look at queuing and crowding, so the classic area obviously is ambulance waiting, crowding in the emergency department, and we've got heat maps on crowding with the emergency department. We haven't yet done it, but there is the potential to say, what would we expect to happen if we reduced, if you like, the profile of flow into the front door of the emergency department, both on queuing and crowding from a heat map point of view. That's possible, but we haven't done that yet. But that would be definitely a really useful avenue to pursue.
Okay, thank you. And I think the data that we're getting, or the way that you're presenting this, is really helpful for us as board members. So thank you.
Thank you, John. And thank you, Nick. Just for me as well, is that sustainability of this plan throughout the months ahead. Has the modelling looked at the sustainability over the longer term as well, as given that some of these issues here will continue beyond winter as well?
Again, thank you, Chair. Really, really good point. So I'll give you a little bit of historical perspective about why that's such an important point. We've very traditionally had winter plans coming to the board, pretty specifically, and everyone knows the winter plan term. In the last few years, we've moved into, this is a 6-month plan. This is a plan about half a year, because winter doesn't really go away just around Christmas. What we've understood as we've reviewed our model from last year and how the system has felt the pressure last year is it's actually moving from 6 months to all year. And so you're absolutely right, is that we're trying to build blocks which are for all year round. So GOPS is for all year round, risk management is for all year round, our approach to variation and derogation is for all year round. So, you know, this is the natural history of what we're trying to do. And in many respects, we maybe in the future need to drop the winter word, but at the same time, everyone understands what we mean about winter pressures. So it's one of those things where it is a helpful label, but actually all of the planning intent around this is really about year-long and whole system planning.
Thanks very much for that, Nick. Thank you. I can't see any other questions or comments on this paper. Can we turn to the recommendations then? And can we agree the recommendations on the paper, please?
Agreed.
No one hasn't, so I'll take that as recommendations there are agreed. Thanks very much for that. Item 7 then moving on item 8 moving on is the winter 22-23 communications activity. Stuart, I think you're going to talk us through this, please. Stuart.
I am, Chair. Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. I'll just take a few minutes to speak about some of the key aspects of the winter activity this year, and then I'll test our technology by sharing a few images. So NHS Grampian's approach to communications this winter is based upon learning gained over the past 2 winters, during which we've successfully reduced the need to redirect people following inappropriate attendance to an emergency department by about 34%. So, you know, we know it works. What the past 2 years has shown us the benefit of are kind of 3 key things: working with partners, not just across health and social care, but the third sector, to deliver complementary messages that collectively improve our reach. Treating people as partners in their own care and giving them easy access to information that enables them to choose the best way of getting help. It was touched on just a few moments ago about, you know, potentially a better way of getting help that leads to an improved patient experience, and then being selective about and thoughtful about where our messages, well, what our messages are, but also where they appear. So we're not adopting a put every message everywhere approach, and instead using sort of memorable themes to remain clear throughout our communication, which both minimises confusion and as well as reducing message fatigue and stopping people disengaging as we try to communicate them with them through the season. So our winter activity actually began a couple of weeks ago in November, but it will run through until March, with the main focus of our activity between December and January. Some of you may have seen the week and they highlighted pressures both across the whole health and care system, but crucially what people could do to help, something we know is vital. And those messages included the role of an emergency department to help reduce those inappropriate presentations and help us manage waits, timely collection from hospitals to support discharge and flow, the different ways of accessing primary care, and importantly, from a social care perspective, recruitment. So it very definitely highlighted the interconnectivity and interdependencies of our health and social care system. So building on that series, the winter campaign proper will begin week commencing the 12th of December, and we're going to use a winter wellness guide as a platform for a media launch. I'll just try and share a visual with you. Bear with me just a moment. Hopefully you can see that.
It's not there yet.
So the wind. Oh.
Your screen's showing, but I can't see anything on the screen yet.
Give it a moment. Might be the size of the file. Tell me when you can see some pictures of our winter wellness guide.
There.
Yeah.
Now.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Just a slight delay. I did say we'd test our technology. So the intention is to use the Winter Wellness Guide, which is a 15-page booklet, and that highlights not just advice on health, but also healthy eating, keeping warm, financial advice, and much more. And in addition to being available digitally via our website and content being used across social media, there are around 7,000 printed copies that are being produced, and they'll be distributed by our health and social care partnerships with support from Grampian Region Equality Council, and that will ensure that it reaches out to more vulnerable groups and appears in places such as food banks. So we're not employing just a digital only approach. Having said that, the website itself will also form part of the launch on the week of the 12th. So we've got a new section of our website that's currently being built that will use content both from the Winter Wellness Guide as well as other content from different partners. And we know our website receives between 45 and 65,000 visits per month at this time of year. So it's a really useful way of reaching out to people. Now, because we know winter is compounded by a number of factors, the cost of living crisis, etc., so that website will contain content of that sort as well. So it will provide helpful links to third parties, and you'll note that we are signposting health and social partners, care partnerships, local councils, and charities as well, using that page. Content from both the guide and the website will also form the basis of a full page feature in the Evening Express that same week, and we'll cross promote the website and the availability of the wellness guide using the newspaper as well. I'll just move on to the next page. So creatively, this year's creative campaign is based around our existing and extremely successful Know Who to Turn To campaign and website. That's become very well recognised and established itself as a go-to source of information over several years, and it usually receives between 12,000 to 15,000 views over the winter period. Now that Know Who to Turn To website is being refreshed as well with additional content, and I created the question and answer format of the site. So we're using a quiz show format by posing what we know are typically more commonly asked questions and providing the answers, but at the same time potentially directing people more appropriately to alternative pathways of care, as well as supporting them to stay well. One of the things we are doing this year, which is an enhancement, is enhanced targeting. So we've looked at some of the presentations that come into emergency departments over the past 5 years, and what that's revealed is, for example, we see a large volume of minor eye-related complaints. They accounted for over 3,500 attendances between 2015 and 2020, and that resulted in the people who presented with them waiting for over 885 hours. And they could potentially be seen by an optician, an alternate pathway, and that would have avoided unnecessary wait, resulting in a better experience, and at the same time would have freed up capacity within emergency departments. So we're definitely using data to inform some specific aspects of the campaign this year. Where can you expect to see and hear us? Well, I hope in many different places. So we will continue to facilitate media visits and use media relations throughout the season to promote particularly any changes. If GOPES, for example, results in any changes that may affect patients, or we're seeking to provide advice around a weather event and encourage people to avoid taking unnecessary risks. There'll be the Winter Wellness Guide. We're also producing around 1,500 posters, which are being distributed out to public locations such as supermarkets, pharmacies and community centres. There's our website, as I mentioned, and social media channels, although it's worth pointing out that obviously there are our own social media channels. We're sharing everything with our partners and we're asking them to do the same for us, so we're cross-promoting again. But we do recognise that our social media presence, whilst good, I think we have 1 in 5 people in Grampian are following us on social media. That alone is not enough, which is why you'll see in the paper a reference to the paid advertising that we're doing throughout the season as well. So social media, there will be paid advertisements for those people who aren't necessarily already following NHS Grampian channels. So that gives us a further reach of over 400,000 people. We have some booked radio across North Sound 1 and 2, Moray Firth radio, as well as some flexible radio reads as well, so the ability to ramp up should we need to in the event of or weather events, so we can pick and choose when those appear to suit our particular needs. But then also you'll probably also be aware that over the past 12 months we've invested on some internal channels. So we now have more than 40 digital display screens across clinical settings in Moray City and Shire, and we are expanding this network actually over the coming sort of 6 months. But we already have these screens in place, so we'll be making sure our creative appears on the screens. And we'll also be using the fleet vehicles that we had adapted last year to be able to carry large advertising banners. So we'll have a number of our large 7.5 ton trucks will be carrying that know who to turn to message throughout the winter season. So that's a very visible, effectively mobile advertising hoarding that will be seen by a number of people as we progress through the winter period. So it's a mixture of both digital and non-digital channels, a mixture of supporting people to stay well, but also supporting them to find the right pathway of care for the most expedient and best patient experience possible. So I'll pause there, but I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you for that, Stuart, and thanks to the team as well for the innovation and new ideas and creativity they're bringing to this important work as well. So thank you to everyone involved for that. Any questions or comments from Bert, please?
Thank you, Chair. I'm not sure if it's my connectivity or if it's everybody was having the same problem as me, but I wasn't catching all that Stuart was saying. And I wanted to go back to a point that he made early on. And I think he said that over the past 2 winters, there's been a 34%, I think he said, reduction in the number of people turning up at ED. Is that what you said, Stuart?
We know we've managed to redirect people. 34% have been moved away from ED as a result of what would have been an inappropriate attendance. That's stats that have been provided by public involvement. Gillian Evans' team.
Okay, thank you. Just a couple of other points. I think there's been an extensive amount of work done in relation to communication, very, very impressive range of things being considered. I wondered if the initiative is locally driven, so is this all being tailored to meet local needs, or is this being driven nationally, or is it indeed a combination of both? And just, I guess, another thing to mention is I've been noticing in the press a number of warm initiative hubs being set up right across the region, which I think is a very, very positive step. Lots of churches, I think, are involved, and I know in my own area there are 2 that have been set up, and I think if we can find a way of getting these leaflets and other means of advertising into them to work in partnership, I think that's another positive step. Thank you.
Thank you, Bert. Thank you for those suggestions. Amy, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks to the team. I would like to welcome the work that's been done. I think it goes, you know, a good way to answering our questions about going out to people to where they are, speaking to people in their language, quite literally. So I think it's really welcome. And I like the fact that we've got the partnerships working. So that's good with our IJBs and other partners. And we've got that nuanced approach for people's level of illness or where to go. So I think that's all good. I was just wondering, can we measure the success of the campaign? I guess that might be in our numbers, but just wondered if colleagues had any thoughts on that. But thank you very much.
Thank you. I'll just come to Luann first, and then I'll get Stuart to respond to Bert, Amy and Luann together. Luann, please.
Thank you. And yeah, really good to see all this work, Stuart. So thank you and the team for that. My question is really just about thinking of, there's so many messages out there at the moment, and what are we doing anything proactively to connect with particularly our third sector, but also I'm thinking of our local councillors. Is there any plans to have briefing sessions with them? Because I think over the winter period, they are often third sector and our local councillors in our communities have got a really good direct route to some of our most vulnerable people, and I worry that maybe some of the messages that they can convey could maybe just get missed. So I'd be interested to hear what's being done proactively to help them see how they can help us get these messages out.
Thank you. I'll turn back to Stuart now for responding to all three comments. Thank you, Stuart. No, we can't hear you, Stuart.
Sure. Just commented about. Can't hear me?
No.
Try turning my camera. I tried turning my camera off.
Without your camera, yeah, might help. Thank you.
Is that any better?
Yes, I think so. Carry on.
Okay, so nationally, yeah, important point. The things I've spoken about today are the NHS Grampian tailored materials that are based on our own learnings. There are obviously national campaigns running over the winter period as well. So it is that balance between understanding what national activity is doing and then trying to fill the gaps or shine more detail on local initiatives where we can, without adding to the plethora of messages out there that might, you know, inadvertently cause confusion or apathy amongst our audiences. So is that balance between saying enough but not saying so much that people start to disengage, trying to effect behavioural change without, you know, boring people or annoying people. So it's a fine balance. We think we've arrived at that balance based on our learnings from last year, where we employed the same tactics over selectivity, which resulted in a very minimal decline in engagement in our social media channels over the winter period. We lost about 5% of our audience over a 3-month period, which actually we classed as a success. But we do monitor it on a daily and weekly basis to understand the level of engagement we're getting. So there is an element of, we don't want to switch people off and see them unfollow us, because then we lose them altogether. So there's a balance between achieving those two things. Success measurement, it's built in insofar as following engagement levels, but also knowing the amount of advertising and what that buys us in terms of eyes and ears, seeing and hearing our messages. So we know what our limited spend will achieve for us. The devil is in the detail in terms of, does that translate into change? So obviously, as we move through the season, we'll be able to see, are we actually affecting the number of people who are presenting with minor eye conditions, for example? Hence why we've built in a specific element of the campaign that looks directly at that, so we can pick from the broader figures where we think we might have actually had a benefit as a result of the communications alone. And then just picking up on working with partners, I think it's a two-way street, in that obviously we are endeavouring to share our partners' messages and avenues for communication. So there will be links on our website to third sector partners, to council colleagues, set on similar pages for Murray City and Shire, and a reciprocal arrangement we hope will be in place where they'll do the same for us. The structures are there that support that. So we have our comms cell, which meets 3 times a week, which has health and social partnership representation. And we're also having the regular meetings of the public communications group, which brings in both SAS, Police Scotland, fire and rescue, as well as council and health and social care partnership comms leads. So as of the week after next, the week of the 12th, we'll be implementing a coordination email that literally shares on a weekly basis what everybody's working on and asks them to put input into that so that we can mutually share one another's message and priorities for the week. But equally, we can be mindful for any overlaps or unwitting competition between ourselves for audience space.
Thank you, Stuart, for that. You were fading out. You were fading out a bit towards the end of that as well. But I think it's really important that working with partners. I know partners in the councils are producing their own materials as well. So it's really important this coordination, so we don't confuse members of the public, that we're actually enhancing the information available and sharing what we can across the piece. So that coordination, I think, is absolutely essential. I'll just bring Susan in if she wants to add anything to this as well. Susan.
Yeah, thanks very much. And just to complement the activity of the comms cell, the public health team had liaised across the patch to identify what was being produced and making sure that materials were complementary. I think in terms of the third sector, a very valid point, a fantastic amount of work is ongoing. We've actually organised meetings with the third sector interface across Grampian, and the conversation was two-way. It was, what can we do to help you with your endeavours? Because as I say, there is a huge amount of work going on, particularly around the cost of living. That has identified a few things, so we're working on those together, and absolutely we will share this material with them. Thanks.
Thank you, Susan. Joyce, please.
Thanks, Alison. I just wondered if anybody thought about going along and doing something on SHMU, on Stationised Media Unit, which is a great little radio station that reaches communities that don't often reach mainstream. And a lot of the messages could get out, not by advertising necessarily, but by doing some sort of discussion on some of the programmes there. Thanks.
Brilliant. That's a great idea to put in the mix as well, that I'm sure Stuart will reflect on as well. So thanks for that, Joyce. Thank you. I can't see any other hands up on this one. So can we agree the recommend? Stuart has seen that, so he's agreed with you, Joyce, on that one. Thank you. Can we agree the recommendations on this, please, to endorse the proposals in the paper? Thank you. Can we agree? Yes. Thank you. Brilliant for that. Appreciate that. You'll probably be glad now we're going to have a 10-minute comfort break. We will come back at 2 minutes past 12 to continue the meeting at that point, please. 2 minutes past 12, we'll continue. Thank you. Okay, it's 2 minutes past 12 now, so we'll get started. Hope you've all had time to have enough of a break there. Thanks for coming back here. We'll move on then to item 9. Sorry, Ian, do you want to?
Yeah, thanks, Alison. I'm going to have to leave the meeting about 25 past, but I should hopefully be back in time for the closed meeting. Just want to apologise now. I'll just disappear when I need to go. Sorry.
Thanks, Ian. Thanks for letting us know. Okay, we will turn to item 9, the strategic plan for Dr. Gray's Hospital, and we'll turn to Adam Caldwell. It's Adam who's going to introduce this discussion for us. Thank you, Adam.
Thanks very much, Chair. So just a couple of comments to introduce this. So a couple of purposes. Firstly, just to see the level and scale of engagement, and just to confirm that that has been considered by our new Population Health Committee. Following the Murray Integration Joint Board meeting, which we attended last week, in line with some of the discussion that we had at the last formal board meeting, we're going to consult with community councils in Murray area as well. That was a specific ask from the Integration Joint Board, so the team are just picking that up and trying to make arrangements for that at the moment. There's clearly a small number of emerging issues, and that's really the thrust of the paper, is really to get those in the board's comments and thoughts, and clearly to start to expose that in a very formal way to the public, to understand what some of those issues are that will help to develop and form the strategic intent for Dr. Gray's Hospital. Those topics, just to sort of mention them, is really that idea of what's the scale and scope, so what's the local delivery for Dr. Gray's as we go forward, and trying to get that just at the sweet spot is going to be really key. But to achieve that, we need to have a really successful networked model, and I think the evidence from almost everywhere suggests that this network approach is now critical for this sort of approach and the service provision to be really as we need it within Dr. Gray's. That also works really hand in glove with the workforce questions that have been coming up through the engagement, and this idea of matching sort of specialty work and capabilities with the demand and the requirement locally. And again, keep thinking network and how people work within a network system. There's a key bit about infrastructures come up, and we've set out in the paper a very clear process that's going to happen over the next year to really understand those issues and see, as we describe the service delivery, what's the most appropriate infrastructure that we need for Dr. Gray's Hospital. And then another really important thing to mention was this idea of some immediate tangible action. So again, through this huge engagement with staff, the public and partner organisations, it's very clear that there's some things that Alistair and Simon as the local leadership team need to get onto, and they've got action plans around those emerging issues. And just the final bit that wasn't in the paper, as you'll appreciate, the papers are written a reasonable bit in advance of this. Had a really fantastic session last week with some about technology and this really interesting concept of how a remote healthcare expertise, and again that's a key thrust of the strategy, and how we can transform that remote ability through the use of technology. And interestingly, it was one of the questions that Batty had asked at the Integration Joint Board, and the session about technology happened after that, so really tying together nicely. So I think that will be a really key bit that you'll see in February as well. So Simon, obviously, who leads locally, is there, and maybe just wants to say one or two words, if that's okay, Alison, before we open up to questions.
Lovely, thank you, Adam. Simon, please.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I think Adam's covered these off already or mentioned them. I think there's some really rich contributions from staff and the community. And I think, really important that our delivery plan doesn't kick everything into kind of the next few years. There are some things that we'll be able to do in the more immediate and kind of present time. So I think that's going to be really important, because there is opportunity to do some of the early kind of fixes and resolve some issues early on. So that's going to be really important that we're planning for the short, medium, and then longer term. And I think in terms of that medium and longer term, as Adam's described, I think we need to follow a very clear process about service planning comes first. There's been some media coverage which is really good in terms of having media coverage of the work we're doing, but media coverage about a desire for a new hospital. And I think even if we started a process today, it's going to take us well over a decade before we'd ever see a new build, if the money was even there. So I think we need to plan within the current buildings footprint, and I say buildings because we've got more than just Dr. Gray's. We've got assets elsewhere, and Adam's already mentioned the networked model, and what are the opportunities for use of more technology and care closer to home. But certainly we've taken that message on board about we need to look at, do the buildings constrain our ability to deliver on our strategic intent, and if they do, then we need to be open to thinking about what the future looks like, and do we need a new hospital. But for now, I think we need to very much focus on the services that we want to deliver and how that will fit into the footprint that we've got. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Simon. Thank you. I'll open it to any comments or questions. Obviously, this is an initial comments because we obviously have the strategy coming back to the February meeting to look at that in full. But so there's initial comments here as well. John and then Luann, please.
Yeah, thank you, Alison. yeah, I welcome the report and the way that it is framed, and I think the emerging issues, if they're not actually addressed in the way that you're bringing them forward, then we're not going to be able to create something that is sustainable there. And I think the one element though that I'm kind of wondering about is how we, and the work that we need to do to gain the confidence and the trust of the community so that we can go on that journey with them together. And I'm quite assured about the board's commitment and what it wants to do, and it wants to do something that will work for the 2020s, 2030s, that is effective. And I think we've got to be quite brave in sort of putting all of that forward, saying we are thoroughly committed, but this is going to be quite complex and we need a period to co-produce this with the community. Certainly take Simon's point that we want some early action, but we've got to get that balance between that early action not being seen as us not being serious about the long-term bit. And so it's just that bit of trust and confidence in the community. Be just interested to hear a bit more, maybe from Simon and Adam, of what we can do on that bit and what the board can do to assist in that.
Thank you. I'll just bring Luann in first and then I'll turn back to Simon and Adam. Luann?
Thank you, and yeah, really welcome this update, and particularly the strength around the thinking about the plan and the networked approach that's being taken. And I was really struck when I met a number of staff up in Murray recently that some teams have got really good links and relationships with the wider system already, and it really struck me that for this to be as successful as we want it to be, those interdependencies need to be really explicit and clear from the outset. So I just wondered how we're thinking about the interdependency with the wider network at this stage, so that we don't risk just looking inward, but we actually look outward to how we can strengthen both what's happening in Murray, but also what's happening and what's needed in the wider system.
Thank you. Can I turn to Simon first? Do you want to comment on those points?
Yes, thanks. So I think the community confidence, I think a lot of that will build actually from staff confidence. I think staff will be our greatest ambassadors on this. If they have confidence in the direction of travel we're taking, I think that will be confidence booster to the community. But I think from my perspective, from Murray perspective, I think it's about the ongoing dialogue with the community. And I think we've got some really good mechanisms that we're building, not only through this strategic work, but also through things like the work around the maternity models. So it's how do we maintain those links with community groups and continue that dialogue, so it doesn't become here's the strategy, and then it all goes quiet. So we need to continue with that communication piece and that conversation with community, and I think that forms part of that answer to Luann's point about the interdependencies, because actually if we're talking about a network model, we're talking about not just Grampian but actually across the north as a region, and I think that again is a conversation with all of our communities across the north about where we can best provide the access to services. So, you know, close to home for some of the more generic, you might have to travel for the more specialist services, but how can we reduce that travel? How can we use the building bases we've got to really network that model and increase access? And I think there's a real potential for that. We're already seeing some really good work, you know, in terms of, for instance, the network model for emergency medicine, the emergency department consultants who work between Aberdeen Royal Infirmary and Dr. Gray's. And, you know, we're talking about how we build a network model for maternity services. So I think, as Adam described in his opening remarks, you know, that networking is going to be more and more important. We need to support our staff with that, because that's a different way of working. That's a different kind of flexibility. But we've got some good examples of that happening already. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, I'm going to bring Amy in now, please. Amy.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Simon and Adam, for this. It was a really helpful piece, and others who've been involved in it as well. Some really useful themes coming out for the development of what we will decide to take forward. I guess for me, I just want to be clear that the feedback from patients is distinct. It could be distinct from feedback from staff, and I'm sort of sensing that a network model is something that staff have said they want. I'm not sure patients would see it like that, so I just want to be sure that the patient voice, although it's going to be heterogeneous, is a distinct one in the feedback. And the second one is, I think what Joyce said in the beginning of the session about framing our conversations, framing the what's possible within the constraints will be a really good opportunity for us to do this with Dr. Gray's work, but really encouraged with what I've seen so far. Thank you.
Brilliant, thank you. Does Simon or Adam want to respond about the patient voice?
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. Yeah, so quite a lot of the themes that are developing at the moment, Amy, are from staff and a small bit of public feedback. If you remember, the public engagement and work in timeline is just slightly later, so that's just starting to come into the thinking, but it isn't particularly reflected in this paper for just the reasons of the catch up. So it will be distinct. There's from the bits I've looked at, there's lots of overlap as you'd expect, and then there will be some distinctness. Interestingly, not about the network that I've seen yet, but maybe that will come. But absolutely, as you say, that will be clear. How different bits of the stakeholders are reflected differently, and clearly the bits of overlap. And of course, part of the strategic intent draws on other evidence bases as well. So it's triangulating lots of things, stakeholder engagement and involvement being one of a number of things. So, but thanks, Amy. Yeah, good observation.
Thank you, Adam. Rona, please.
Thank you, Chair. I heard a lot about engagement and communication and building trust, and if we get stuff on side, then it'll spread, etc. Not an awful lot from the report about demonstrating immediate and tangible actions. We've done a lot in Murray and Elgin about communicating and engaging. That we're not talking about today is delivering on the ground, because if you don't on the ground, all you're doing is still talking. So I'd like to hear more about the immediate delivery on the ground to try and get people to understand how real and will be there. Thank you.
Yeah, delivery on the ground is absolutely essential to have to build that trust that's been talked about as well. Simon, do you want to comment?
Yeah, happy to pick that up, Chair. Yeah, I think back to my comments at the beginning. There are there's some feedback which are things that we can deal with in the immediacy. There was the senior staff committee in Murray and Elgin last night, and actually there's a whole raft of work going on and a dialogue around, people linking their conversations to the strategic vision and future for Dr. Gray's. So I think that feedback that we're looking at the moment has got a real richness to it, and I absolutely agree. I think there are things that absolutely need to be kind of delivered in the immediacy. There are some things that clearly we're not going to wait for a delivery plan, because they're things we can act on now, and there are conversations going on with team members within Dr. Gray's now. But I think the delivery plan needs to be really visible so that staff can see what it is we're trying to achieve, and we can measure when we've achieved that. So I think again, it's not, we shouldn't be trying to hide things from the delivery plan because we're saying we fixed them now. I think we need to be really clear. This is what people told us. This is what we're going to do. And if we've done some of those, at least we can say it at the point when we've got a delivery plan going forward.
Thank you, Simon. I'd just like to add at this point as well how important, valuable I found the visit the board had to Dr. Gray's a few weeks ago now, and talking to staff and meeting staff at Dr. Gray's as well was a really valuable thing for us to do as a whole board to increase our understanding. And I've been up since and met other staff as well. And I think that ongoing engagement from us is a really important part of what we can do to help development of the strategic intent in Dr. Gray's as well. So thanks at this point to everyone who helped organise those visits and help us engage directly with the staff that we did on those occasions. Thank you. John, please.
Yeah, Chair, thanks. Can I ask and see if Adam is okay with this? Because I assume that it's how we would be going forward, but if we could minute that the Population Health Committee will receive further reports on progress with engagement and co-production.
Adam?
Yeah, absolutely, John. I think what we did with the plan for the future really set a good tone for that, and our intention is absolutely to do that. If you're happy to continue to receive them, that will be part of the ongoing work. Yeah.
Okay, so if we add that to the minutes, that'll be done. That's great. Thank you. Any other comments on this paper, please? Obviously, if we agree the recommendations, we'll receive the strategy at the February meeting and then agree to receive the delivery plan at the April meeting in 2023. So that's obviously a stage in our process as well, moving forward. If there's no other comments on this one, please, I was just checking the chat there to see it's Ian's had to leave us now. Can we agree the recommendations this paper, please?
Yeah, agreed.
Thank you. Okay, then moving on then to item 10, the infrastructure essential equipment replacement programme. First of all, 10.1, the upgrade of the Hutchison magnetic resonance imaging MRI scanner at Wood End. I think Paul Baku's talking to us about this. I think, Paul?
Okay, good morning, Chair. Again, good afternoon now, isn't it? So thank you. The team, Sharon Jones is with us today, and this paper highlights the importance of MRI imaging being critical to the design delivery of safe patient pathways. The team have presented in the paper the detail and the purpose of funding, amounting to £1.85 million, and are asked for support and approval for the funding, and also approval and support for delegated authority to the Director of Infrastructure and Sustainability. The key thing also to highlight to the board is to assure you that no harm has come as a result of any dysfunction of the MRI scanner. No harm in terms of heating, i.e. burns to the patient, no harm to poor quality acquisition with under-treatment of patients or over-treatment of patients. So that said, I'm just going to hand over to Sharon, if I may, please, to go through the paper briefly, and then it's open for questions. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Paul, for the introductions. So the MRI paper that we're discussing today is MRI Hutchison scanner, which is located up on the Wood End site. It's a very busy scanner, providing about 400 MRI scans undertaken every month. The scanner is about 5 years past its best intended life, if you like. The Royal College of Radiologists recommends these scanners are replaced at 10 years, and we've kind of nursed it along to 15 years, and the infrastructure within, including the Faraday cage, the ventilation and so forth, which has given us some technical issues and some downtime of scanning itself. Replacing the scanner and upgrading the area around the scanner sits nicely in with Adam's plan for the future around people, pathway and places. We've engaged with our patients and the high acuity work we do up there, and we know that we can make improvements to make what can be a stressful examination a lot more pleasant for our patients. Engaging with our vendors, we have realised that we can upgrade our scanner, presenting about 300k worth of saving to our health board if it's upgraded rather than replaced. And working with our turnkey suppliers and our architects, we've already had our early demarcation discussions. So we plan to start this work enthusiastically on the 1st of April and deliver it by the end of June. In order to keep our business continuity going, we've engaged with a framework provider called Forford Medical. They will place a van up on the Wood End site. We've got the infrastructure up there to site that van, and we will staff that van ourselves, so there should be no negative impact on patient pathway, critically our cancer pathway, whilst we upgrade this facility. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Sharon. Any questions, please, for Sharon? Amy, please.
Yeah, thanks very much, Sharon. Good to see this. I sort of would have expected to see something around net zero of this paper, that we know that MRIs account for something like 9% of our carbon footprint in healthcare. So can you give assurances that the new MRI, should it be approved, will help with that, will for example have more efficiencies in the way it's run, this use of power, and also in the use of chemicals that are used in the process?
Amy, forgive me, it's not my area of expertise. Regarding the power, I can assure you there is no increased power. It is the same power required to run the MRI scanner, and you're right, they are a big usage of power. Because we're upgrading this magnet, it should be considered, I suppose, a greener solution, because we're not replacing it, we are maintaining the main magnet. And we will still require liquid helium in order to run our magnet when you refer to chemicals there. But I don't have anything further to say around the net zero, unless my colleague Paul Allen has anything on that.
Paul?
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, colleagues. So all I would say to that is the process of upgrading is obviously less in terms of a sort of carbon footprint around net zero, because we're not going for a completely new install. So the upgrade will be a reduced footprint. So that's its concern. But in terms of the ongoing running of that, as Sharon was saying, you know, there are obviously things that are associated with that are taken into place. And as the next versions of technology, whatever in the future come along, they might deal with some of the questions that Amy's asking. But these are key devices that are really important in terms of dealing with pathways and diagnostics. And these are the leading devices we have across the globe that we are procuring. So beyond that, Chair, I'm not sure what else I could add. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. And Sharon, Joyce, please.
Thank you. I just wanted to know what the benefit, apart from the 300,000, is of upgrading rather than buying new, and what the difference would be in lifespan of the two types of equipment.
Thank you, Sharon.
Yeah, so working with Siemens here on the ARI site, and actually Siemens are quite probably the most used vendor for MRI across Scotland. They're considered to have superior image quality, be easy to teach and train on. So because we've already got a team fully trained up on this, it's more versatile, easier to move our business seamlessly across from the old scanner into the newly upgraded scanner. So whilst the main magnet itself is transferred off site and reshimmed, all the hardware, all the coils, everything around the scanner is upgraded and replaced as brand new, and we've specified all of that. We've worked with our colleagues in NSS and on the imaging framework around all of that, and we get the very latest software which optimizes our image quality, improves patient diagnostics, and all of this is guaranteed for a further 10 years through the framework. So we agree a point of sale contract at the point of purchasing this off the framework, and that locks in our maintenance costs for the next 10 years. So there's no increase in revenue around staffing or in maintenance costs for this proposal.
That's great. Thank you very much, Sharon.
Thank you, Joyce. Any other questions? Can I just ask one about, I noticed there's a 3-month installation period, Sharon. We're able to cope with any issues that arise through that one in terms of patient care? That's all planned in for, is it?
It is planned for and counted within the sums shown on this paper. So we have engaged with a company called Furford Medical that will provide us an MRI van only solution, which we will staff with our own staff and run this for the period of the 3 months. There will be no negative impact on patient care.
Brilliant. Really pleased to have that reassurance. Thank you. Anne, please.
Hi, Sharon. My question again is, will this van be suitable for patients who are claustrophobic?
Well, and I know this is an issue close to your own heart. Most of our patients who are claustrophobic often let us know before they attend, and we would do our utmost to ensure that they are accommodated on the MRI Craig scanner, which does have a slightly larger bore of 70 centimetres, and with mood lighting and other environmental factors is a much more comfortable experience for our claustrophobic patients. If we know ahead of the patient arriving, we'll do our best to allocate them onto the Craig scanner. And if we don't find out until they arrive and realise that it is not the environment for them, we will obviously put patients at the front of our decision making and rebook them.
Thank you, Sharon. I knew you would.
Thank you very much for that reassurance as well. Thank you. Luann, please.
Just a point on patient safety. I'm just looking for assurance that the mobile unit is covered by the same safety requirements as a static site scanner would be.
Yes, Luann, it is. And again, we are used to mobile vans working on the ARI site. We've got one here permanently within health for MRI and cath labs on the ARI site. And again, these van suppliers have to go through the Scottish framework, so they have a whole range of quality KPIs that they need to meet. We do have a site prepped and ready with a Marshall socket and power and so forth up on the Woodend site. And after approval today, I will seek engagement from Fairford Medical to come up on site and do their own inspection. And we do that with also colleagues from the resus team and from our physics team as well to help ensure that there's going to be no negative impact up there on image quality and patient safety. So I can assure you that we're well used to this sort of work.
Thank you for that, Sharon. Thank you. I can't see any further comments here. Can we agree the recommendations on this scanner, please? This paper? Thank you. Recommendations agreed on that one. Thank you. Then item 10.2 is the replacement of the NHS Grampian wide wireless network. Paul, I'll turn to you now. Paul Allen.
Okay, thank you, Chair. And since introducing the wireless networking, which was back in 2010 across the Forstall campus initially, we've seen the implementation of ubiquitous wireless network across Grampian through our primary care and secondary care sites, supporting patient care along with smarter and agile working through the use of mobile technology and wireless enabled devices both in the clinical and building management settings. And I think from as the way I see it, it's now hard to imagine 12 years on not having this technology in place which supports safe, effective, efficient and person-centred approaches. The wireless network is beyond its typically expected 7-year life and now needs replacing. And as I hand over to Neil Gordon, our Acting General Manager in eHealth around digital services, he will briefly further demonstrate the value and benefit of its replacement, plus its role in supporting digital transformation and our plan for the future. So I'll just hand over to Neil. Thanks, Neil.
Okay, thanks, Paul. Thanks, Chair. I think in terms of the Wi-Fi service, we've over 3,000 devices across the entire NHS Grampian estate, and that supports 9,000 connected devices to the Wi-Fi service. It supports a service through service transformation through digital and planned for the future strategies. So it's an inherent part of those strategies, and it's a fundamental element of the IT infrastructure. It also underpins the delivery of critical services, and some of those services are your laptops, your computers on wheels, which we've mobilised even more in support of the HETMA programme. The ASCOM phones, the corporate mobile devices, medical devices such as patient monitors, infusion pumps, etc. Wireless label printers. In terms of the process for the Wi-Fi replacement, we've sought recommendation from the equipment the medical devices group to prioritise the replacement. We've also been through the asset management group and agreed to prioritise the budget for replacement using the board's formula capital allocation. In tandem, we've also initiated a procurement process in tender using Gartner as a guide to seek the key suppliers, if you like, using 2 national framework contracts. We've performed the technical and financial evaluation against those tender responses, and subject to approval today, we'll proceed with the preferred supplier, and they'll be notified and we'll start the delivery plan. The delivery plan itself it's going to need 3 months of detailed design, which we'll do in tandem with the procurement process. Through the preferred supplier, who as yet don't know, they've committed to deliver the hardware and support of this by the end of financial year. So we've got that commitment. So again, through the detailed design and preparation, we'll then start a programme of installation, which will take 6 months. So by October next year, we will have a complete replacement of the Wi-Fi system. The equipment that taking our preferred supplier, it's a straightforward replacement. It requires no invasive electrical or any other infrastructure works. So it'll help a lot in terms of the optimizing the actual delivery process itself, which is quite good. The confirmed capital cost, as you've seen, is 3.4 million. That is actually confirmed. That's inclusive of that, including all the hardware, the enterprise agreement, which is really the software and the firmware, etc., to help drive the whole system, and all the professional services. In terms of cost-saving benefits, because we've brought together the enterprise agreement and the hardware components and professional services under this one capital allocation, we're going to realise a cost avoidance of 1.6 million over the 7 years of the enterprise agreement. So there are no revenue consequences throughout the lifespan of the product, which is worth emphasising. In terms of other benefits, you know, the wireless network performs a fundamental role in enabling staff to perform their roles optimally as well, giving them the tools and ability on a day-to-day basis. So there, you know, when you think of the computers on wheels going into each of the ward locations, working in tandem now with the HEPMA programme going live next year, it's quite fundamental to the delivery of these critical services. But also looking at the Wi-Fi solution itself, it's going to provide an immediate tenfold increase in capacity over the existing devices, which is quite a phenomenal step up in terms of where we are today. And building upon recent investments in IT network backbone, the backbone that underpins all the Wi-Fi service, this can expand even further. So it's therefore showing that we can future-proof this investment as well over that period. So I think collectively it's going to serve Grampian well into the future. That's all I have, Chair.
Thank you very much, Neil. Any questions or comments on Neil or Paul, please? Amy, thank you.
Thanks. I'd like to repeat my question about net zero, please, because I didn't hear anything like that, and I'd like a serious answer, please.
The devices themselves are all powered by from the backbone. There is no electrical power in those devices, so it's really just a standalone device with a cable that plugs into the network, and it's powered via that area. So it's using existing network capacity we have today. It's not adding to anything. These are more optimized devices. They're running at cooler temperatures than previous devices. So I don't have actual specific values to that to demonstrate that, but we're certainly not adding anything to the overload.
Chair, can I come back, please? Just a general issue. If these big infrastructure changes, I think we need to be getting serious about what this means for our sustainability, how these contribute to our net zero targets, even if it's the details of it are less clear. I think it needs to be in our thinking, and I think it needs to be in our thinking more. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy, for that. And Derek's got his hand up next. I know he's got a particular interest in this as well, so maybe he can comment on that as well as his own point as well. Derek, please.
Thank you. I wasn't going to say anything about that, other than I tend to agree with Amy that everything we do now should look at net zero. My question was in relation to the wireless networks. Is it intended that these will be available to the patients so that they can get access?
Chair, I'll maybe come in on that, please.
Yes. Yeah.
So yes, what we've been looking at this in great detail, and whilst there are some potential benefits for patients to get access to that, we've got to get that benefit over what we set aside for day-to-day running, and aware there's other bedside services that are in our hospital environment that already give certain services. So yes, there's availability of that. In fact, it's there already. It's just there's a limit to what we can provide via that. So for example, we can't have lots of streaming down of things, but basic access and what have you is already there.
Thank you for that. Could I suggest that when we have the assessment of items like this in future, we add a paragraph about net zero to it as well? Would that help, Amy, in what you're looking for there as well? As part of the analysis included net zero comment as well. Would that help, Amy?
Yes, Chair, it would. Thank you.
It might be a useful addition to any analysis of assessment of these items that we have in future. So thank you. If the board agrees to that, I think that would be helpful for us all. Thank you. I see a couple of nods there.
Thank you, Chair. If I could just come back on that, I think it's a really valid one that Amy's raised, because we're going to have more and more of these infrastructure related things. And as advances in technology, what have you, they'd like to think there's improvements in efficiency and use of power, etc. But if we can build that in a statement, I'm more than happy to take that on. Thank you, and thanks.
Brilliant. Thank you for your support for that, Paul, as well. Thank you, Adam.
Yeah, I'm really supportive of net zero. I'm just conscious there may be a learning curve of our expertise to describe exactly what we're after, but I think it's the right step in the direction to be able to do it. I'm just conscious, you know, next month, if there's something, we may not be able to have it to the nth degree yet, so there's probably a learning curve as we go through.
Yeah, thank you, Adam. I totally accept that it will be something that will improve over time. But like with everything we're doing as well, it's a step in the right direction, and the content will improve as we move forward on items like that. Thank you, Caroline.
Yeah, so just to build on that, I think like all of these things, when the papers are structured with the right headings for us, that force us to move along that learning curve, it's really helpful. So I will take off line with Sarah and Paul in particular around this one, just how we could embed that in the same way that we embed quality of patient care, impact on our colleagues and finance in board papers, to really start to have that in the forefront of our minds all the time. And appreciate the reference from Amy and also from Adam that we won't get that right as we develop our expertise, but it'll definitely help us.
Thank you. It's obviously a step in the right direction, and will evolve over time as well. So I appreciate that, but thank you for contributions on that. With that comment, can we agree the recommendations on the paper that we have in front of us today, though? Can we agree that? Yeah, thank you. I've got nods on that one as well. So thank you for that one. Moving on then to item 11, we have the Forum and Integration Joint Board reports. First of all, we have the Area Clinical Forum paper in front of us for noting. Kim's not with us today. Any points you want to draw out from that paper over here, Luann?
Thank you. It was just the reference around radiology and some concerns there. Just not for getting an answer here, but just wanted to know where that's gone for that to be looked at.
Thank you. Paul Baku, could you maybe tell us where it's gone? I think.
Yes, of course. Thank you, and thank you, Luann. I think the short answer is it's gone through a considerable journey. And I would be looking to reassure the board that where we started 2 weeks ago with our level of shared understanding and detailed accounting is very different to where we are now. So where we are now, through a combination of steps with the service in radiology and other advisory boards, including the consultant subcommittee, and last night Dr. Gray's Hospital Senior Staff Committee and the Anaesthetic Staff Committee and others to come, is firstly a shared understanding, an update in the accounting and total available funding through not only what came through originally, but what has come through subsequently, and the very significant contribution through the board in terms of the total collective annual non-recurring funding that supports a number of services through to the end of the financial year. So that's what I would like to say, and I think there's a lot of detail behind all of this, which I'm more than happy to share and present or discuss as required.
Thank you very much for that, Paul. Thank you. Luann, you happy with that?
Yeah, I think the important thing for me to hear was that that's being picked up and addressed with the relevant colleagues. You know, just it sounds like a significant issue, and so I'm happy with that.
Thank you very much, Luann. Thank you. Joyce?
Yeah, just following on from what Luann said, I'm happy to hear about that, Paul. And I think simplistic clarity for me is that we're going to have enough money to have the staff to run the service, because there's no point investing all that money if we don't have anyone to do it. And I think some clarity on that in the future would be appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a point we can take forward as well. Thank you. Thank you very much for that. Okay, so can we note that paper then, please? And move on to the Grampian Area Partnership Forum paper. Stephen, please.
Thank you, Alison. Colleagues, you've got the report, which is for noting. Hopefully it reflects the level of discussion and the wide range of topics the Grampian Area Partnership Forum has been dealing with the past couple of months. We, I guess, for colleagues' information, we had the benefit of Alison as the new board chair. Her attendance and input to the last meeting, and I guess since this report is following that from Kim on behalf of the Area Clinical Forum, I would draw colleagues' attention to the joint working group that's going to be set up between those two committees to try and develop and hopeful solutions to the long-standing challenges around staff getting breaks, rest and recovery. Happy to take any questions or comments.
Thank you for that, Stephen. Any questions or comments on this paper, please?
If I can, Chair. Stephen, good luck with the car parking review. I remember the last one. I wish you luck.
Thank you, Rona.
Thank you very much for that, Rona. I appreciate that. Joyce, please.
Thanks. I'd just like to thank Stephen for the report and the work on the Industrial Action Short Life Working Group, because I think that demonstrates the importance of partnership working, what can be achieved by working together and ensuring that everyone's going to be treated fairly and in line with the sort of culture we want to have in NHS Grampian. So thanks for that, Stephen.
Thank you, Joyce. That's a really important point to emphasise as well. So thank you for that. Can we agree to note this paper, please? Thank you. Moving on to 11.3, the integration joint boards. We have papers from the joint boards here. Simon, do you want to say anything to introduce them?
Thanks, Chair. No, there was nothing specific. I think just evidence that the three partnerships continue to cover a lot of ground and significant work to continue to try and progress the partnerships integration and the work that helps the overall system to flow. Thank you.
Yes, for Simon, any questions or comments, please? No, can we agree to note the latest approved minutes of the joint boards then, please? Thank you. Oh, sorry, someone said something? No?
I just said yes, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you. I wasn't sure what you said, Amy. Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. Moving on to the approved committee forum and IJB minutes now. We have the audit committee the 23rd of August. Happy to note that. Thank you. The endowment committee of the 22nd of July. Happy to note that one. Thank you. The clinical governance committee of the 12th of August. Happy to note that. Thank you. The performance assurance finance and infrastructure committee of the 17th of August. Happy to note this. Thank you. The engagement and the participation committee of the 17th of August. Happy to note this. Thank you. And the staff governance committee, sorry, the engagement and participation committee of the 17th of August. Sorry, the engagement and participation committee 17th of August. Used by there were two dates of the 17th of August. Happy to note that one, please. Thank you. The Staff Governance Committee of the 10th of August. To note. Thank you. The Area Clinical Forum of the 7th of September. Thank you. I see thumbs up there as well. The Grampian Area Partnership Forum, 15th of September and the 20th of October. Happy to note both of those. Thank you. Now the integration joint boards, the Aberdeen City IJB of the 30th of August. Happy to note. Thank you. And the Aberdeenshire IJB of the 24th of August. Happy to note. Thank you. And the Murray IJB of the 30th of June. Happy to note. Thank you. That brings us to all those papers we have to note. So thank you. John, please.
Yeah, thank you, Alison. Now that we're receiving these with committees seeking assurance on behalf of the board, it would be helpful perhaps maybe at a seminar in the new year, just to reflect on what we're doing with them as board members at the board itself, which might be slightly different than in the past. So I didn't flag this to Sarah, so I won't necessarily put her on the spot just now to give us some advice around that. But I think it would be useful for us to pause at some point and just reflect what we're expecting of each other in terms of seeing these when they come to the board in future.
Thank you. It's part of our ongoing development work and how we're moving forward as a board. So thanks for that, John. That's an important point that we can certainly reflect on as well. Bert, do you want to comment on that as well?
Yeah, it was really just to agree with what John was saying there. I think with the new process, we do need to take just a little time to consider how we get that assurance as a board through the committee structure, but I appreciate that it is a work in progress. Thank you.
Brilliant, thank you. It's a next stage in development to move things forward on that as well. Thank you. Checking the chat again. All right, that's fine. Thank you. Okay. Moving on then to item 13. Any other business? I think we've just added something there that we need to look at in future, so that'll be noted as something we have to do. Any other business? No? Thank you for that then. And we have our dates of our next meetings. As intimated at the beginning of the meeting, we have a board meeting on Thursday, the 15th of December from 2 o'clock till 4 o'clock. And then we have the next board meeting on Thursday, the 2nd of February, 2023 as well. Thank you for that. Can I just say a final thank you to Rona for her work over the 8 years as well, and her contributions today in her final meeting as well. Very much appreciate the wisdom and insight that Rona has given to us as well. So ending the meeting with a special thanks to Rona as well. With that, and the claps appearing to you, Rona. You don't want to fuss, but you've got claps. So that will do in lieu of fuss. So thank you very much, everyone, for attending the meeting. Thanks for the contributions everyone's made and for getting through the business in a timely but very full and analytical way as well. So thank you very much. And the closed meeting will follow, obviously. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks, Alison. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Alison.
Thanks, Alison. Bye.
Thank you. Cheers.